In the endless darkness of the galaxy there are whispers, echoes of a power that could shake every star system to its core. Imagine a single warlord uniting the countless Ork clans, their brutal energies channeled into one unstoppable tide. Worlds would burn, civilizations crumble, and the Imperium itself would tremble. Could such a nightmare ever exist? Or is it merely a fevered dream of the galaxy's most violent denizens? The answers are as terrifying as they are inevitable. Call to action. If you crave the dark truths of Warhammer 40K, hit like, subscribe, and join us as we explore this galactic horror. The Orks are a storm given flesh, a whirlwind of brutality and laughter, a force of nature as old as the galaxy itself. They grow in strength not through order, but through chaos. Their culture is a tapestry of violence, painted with blood and iron, stitched together with war cries that echo across planets. Each clan is a world unto itself, bound not by loyalty but by the ever-present lust for battle. The notion of unity among such creatures seems absurd, almost laughable, and yet beneath the endless squabbling and the ceaseless brawling, there lies a rhythm, a pulse of psychic energy known as the Waaagh that binds them more tightly than any oath. To understand Orkish unity, one must first understand the nature of the Ork mind. Brutal, simple, and utterly relentless, it thrives on conflict. Orks do not plan in ways humans or other races comprehend. They respond, they charge, they conquer. But in their chaos, there is a strange resonance, a psychic harmony that manifests when the tide of battle grows too large, too loud, too irresistible. The louder the war cries, the stronger the Waaagh becomes. And while this energy often tears clans apart as easily as it binds them, it also holds the key to imagining a galaxy where one warlord could rise above the rest. The tribes are fractious, filled with rivalry and ambition. Bosses rise, warbands clash, and loyalty is a commodity traded with spikes of violence. One Ork may follow a leader for a day, and another for a few seconds. Yet the psychic hum of the Waaagh resonates through them all, whispering promises of glory, conquest, and endless fights. It is in this resonance that the seeds of potential unity lie. For a warlord capable of understanding the subtle push and pull of this energy, of channeling it rather than commanding it outright, the impossible becomes merely difficult. Yet even in thought, such a warlord must contend with the Ork's nature. Orks are not obedient, they are not cunning in the way other species are cunning, they do not scheme for empire or philosophy. Their minds are simple, and their hearts are ever hungry for the fight. To unite them requires not words or logic, but spectacle and might, a display so overwhelming that it overrides instinct, rivalries, and petty squabbles. It is not persuasion, it is awe, fear, and the raw pull of the Waaagh itself. In a universe where a single Ork's battle cry can ignite planetary wars, imagine the effect of a leader whose presence alone turns dissonant clans into a tidal wave of destruction. Across the stars, every Ork knows the stories of the legends, the bosses whose strength and brutality inspired awe even among rivals. These legends are the lifeblood of Orkish culture, whispered through the galaxy in guttural chants, in tales of fire, iron, and slaughter. They remind the clans of what greatness looks like, not in terms of law or reason, but in pure chaotic dominance. And it is this legacy, this shared reverence for power and carnage, that forms the fragile scaffold upon which a united Waaagh could ride. The galaxy has never seen such a thing, and yet the possibility looms like a storm on the horizon. What if a warlord, stronger than all others, more cunning than most, and more resonant with the Waaagh than any before, emerged? What might happen when every scrap, every fight, every clan dispute is redirected toward a single, galaxy-shattering purpose? The Orks are a paradox, wild and free, yet capable of terrifying cohesion under the right force. Understanding this duality is the first step toward imagining a universe where the Orks no longer fight amongst themselves, but against all others as one unstoppable entity. Sweep across a system, even the most stubborn clans follow a shared rhythm, responding instinctively to the surge of psychic energy. It is a symphony of violence, dissonant yet harmonious in its own way, a glimpse into what could be if one warlord mastered this raw force. Orks are creatures of instinct, yes, but instinct can be guided, can be shaped by sheer strength and presence. The right leader could ignite the spark that turns fleeting cooperation into relentless purpose. Consider the battlefield, thousands of orcs, brawling in seemingly random directions, yet bound by the same pulse of rage and hunger, weapons clashing, green-skinned warriors roaring, engines screeching across molten terrain. Amid this chaos, a warlord with unmatched power could step forward, not with words but with deeds, showing supremacy, overwhelming strength, and an aura that even the most cantankerous orc cannot ignore. In such moments, allegiance is not demanded, it is earned, stamped by fear, respect, and the intoxicating allure of dominance. And yet even the most fearsome warlord would face resistance. Orcs are as unpredictable as the warp storms that tear through the Imperium, each one a creature of unique ferocity. Rival bosses would test any claim to supremacy with brutal challenges. Battles would erupt spontaneously, armies would fracture, and countless lives would be lost in displays of raw competition. But the very act of overcoming these rivalries would strengthen the warlord's hold, like forging steel in fire. Every victory adds to legend, every conquest amplifies the Waaagh, until the idea of defiance becomes unthinkable. Beyond the battlefield, the cultural complexity of Orcish society also plays a role. Their humor, their songs, their rituals, their crude but meaningful hierarchy, all these form invisible threads that connect clan to clan. A warlord capable of understanding, even subconsciously, these threads could exploit them, weaving them into a tapestry of unified action. This is not governance, it is orchestration, a delicate manipulation of instinct and myth. The strongest warlords are those who comprehend that orcs do not follow, they erupt, they charge, they explode. Unity is achieved not through control but by becoming the gravitational center of that explosive energy. The galaxy itself becomes a mirror to this potential unity. Across countless worlds, stories of marauding orcs, sudden planetary raids, and the raw ferocity of Waaagh have left civilizations in permanent scars. Even in isolation, the resonance of orc violence hints at what could happen if all these scattered energies converged under one leader. Civilizations might tremble, empires collapse, and entire systems fall to green tides that cannot be reasoned with, bargained with, or contained. The horror lies not in the inevitability of war but in the scale and coherence of. In contemplating Orcish unity, one must also confront the paradox of its beauty. The orcs are grotesque, brutal, and horrifying, but there is poetry in their chaos. A battlefield full of orcs is like a storm rendered tangible, unstoppable, unpredictable, alive with energy. To imagine them united is to imagine the storm intensified, a force of nature capable of reshaping the galaxy itself. The air would tremble with their roars, planets would quake under the weight of their advance, and the stars themselves might seem dim before their overwhelming presence. And so the question persists, could such unity ever truly be realized, or is it an impossible dream, a hypothetical whispered in the ears of those who dare to imagine the unthinkable? Even in their simplicity, even in their unrelenting drive for violence, the orcs hint at a potential that is terrifying in its magnitude. One warlord, one vision, one tidal wave of green fury. These are not merely thoughts for idle speculation. They are a glimpse into a reality so monstrous, so epic, that the galaxy itself could scarcely endure its full expression. In the end, the nature of Orcish unity is both a riddle and a warning. It is a glimpse of chaos made coherent, of instinct harnessed without restraint, and of a power so raw that it could redefine existence itself. The possibility stirs unease across the stars, even among those who dismiss orcs as simple brute. For when the universe faces the potential of a united Waaagh, it is not just war that is inevitable, it is annihilation on a scale that few could even imagine. In the annals of galactic history, certain names stand out, not for diplomacy, nor for philosophy, but for sheer unrelenting brutality. These are the war bosses, titans among orcs, legends etched into the minds of every green-skinned warrior who dares lift a chop. They are the axis upon which the chaos of the universe spins, each one a living storm of rage, cunning, and primal instinct. To speak of them is to speak of the most terrifying forces the galaxy has ever known. From the depths of forgotten worlds to the industrial wastelands of hive cities, tales of war bosses echo through the stars. Gorka Morka, Gozkul Maga, Orkthraka, and dozens more names that inspire awe and fear in equal measure. They do not merely lead, they embody the Waaagh itself, a manifestation of raw psychic energy that channels the collective fury of countless Orks. Their power is not measured in logic or tactics, but in the scale of carnage they can summon, in the devotion of warriors who follow because to do otherwise is unthinkable. These legends are not born, they are forged in fire. Every warboss rises from the crucible of battle, each conquest a step in the shaping of their myth. One clan might see a leader as a tyrant, another as a savior, yet all are bound by the undeniable magnetism of strength. It is said that when Gozkul first appeared on the galactic stage, entire systems trembled. The sheer force of his presence turned scattered bands into a coordinated tidal wave of destruction, a testament to the terrifying potential that one warlord could command all Orks under a single banner. The battles of warbosses are stories in themselves. Each encounter, each planetary siege, is recounted with reverence and terror. Massive armies clash across barren moons and industrial hellscapes, weapons tearing through armor, engines roaring in symphony with the cries of warrior. To follow a warboss into battle is to experience the galaxy in its rawest, most violent form, alive, chaotic, and unyielding. Every victory enhances the legend, every narrow escape becomes a tale whispered around campfires, solidifying the aura of inevitability that surrounds these monstrous leaders. Yet what sets the truly legendary warbosses apart is more than just strength. It is cunning, instinct, and the uncanny ability to read the pulse of the Waaagh. Some Orks are merely fighters, reacting to the chaos around them. A warboss, however, shapes that chaos, directing the frenzy of thousands, sometimes millions of warriors, toward a single purpose. It is a skill that transcends simple violence. It is orchestration on a galactic scale, a terrifying dance of destruction that few can comprehend. Even the galaxy's most organized militaries have learned to fear the name of a warboss. Imperial commanders speak of entire campaigns undone by the strategic brilliance hidden within Orkish brutality. Eldar seers whisper of psychic echoes that presage the approach of a leader whose very presence bends the odds. For the Orks themselves, the legend is a beacon, a rallying cry. When a warboss rises, every chopper, every slugger, every crude engine of war becomes an instrument in a single, resonant melody of annihilation. The essence of these legends is not control, it is inevitability. When a warboss steps onto the battlefield, there is a sense that the universe itself has shifted. Clans that once fought one another now fight side by side, driven by instinct, awe, and the magnetic pull of raw power. And when the warboss falls, even in myth, the echo of their deeds continues to resonate, inspiring new generations of leaders, each striving to match the fury and cunning of those who came before. In contemplating the legends of warbosses, one begins to see the threads of possibility. If a single leader can rise to such dominance among fragmented clans, if the echoes of their victories can unite warriors across worlds, then the dream of a united Waaagh begins to take shape. It is a terrifying prospect, the galaxy reduced to a stage upon which one Ork wielding the power of legend could orchestrate unimaginable destruction. In the whispered tales of Orkish camps, entire generations recall the feats of leaders who carved their dominion through fire, steel, and cunning. They speak of warlords who could crush rival clans without lifting a finger, simply by projecting the aura of invincibility. To the Orks, legend and reality blur. To follow a warboss is to embrace both the myth and the man, or beast that embodies it. Consider the great campaigns that have shaped galactic history. Gozkul Orkthraka's crusade is one such story, an epic of devastation spanning worlds. His rise from a mere warboss to the figurehead of a Waaagh demonstrates the terrifying potential of unity, even if fleeting. Clans that once clashed violently found themselves following his lead, not through logic or law, but through a gravitational pull of sheer force. In every battle, the universe witnessed the terrifying truth. When a warboss reaches a certain threshold of power, the lines between chaos and order, rivalry and alliance, begin to blur. The galaxy itself seems to bend to the presence of a legendary warboss. Entire sectors feel the weight of anticipation, as if stars themselves quiver before the onslaught. Imperial commanders plan cautiously, knowing that underestimating such leaders could mean planetary annihilation. The Eldar watch with dread, reading the psychic ripples that herald an approaching Waaagh. Even among the Orks, the reverence is palpable. It is one thing to follow a warlord, it is another entirely to recognize a figure as a living embodiment of inevitability, a force that cannot be ignored. But even legends are not eternal. Rivalries, betrayals, and the relentless chaos of Ork culture can undo even the most powerful leader. Many war bosses rise to staggering heights, only to fall when hubris or circumstance strike. Yet in their demise they inspire future generations, their stories growing larger. With each retelling, the cycle continues. A new warboss rises, drawn by the gravitational pull of legend, seeking to surpass all who came before. In this way, the galaxy experiences the perpetual march of Orkish ambition, a rhythm as old as the stars themselves. The brilliance of these warbosses lies not only in their ability to wield strength, but in their capacity to channel the psychic resonance of the Waaagh. The more Orks that follow, the stronger the warlord becomes. The battles, the victories, the chants and roars, all feed into a collective energy that is nearly tangible, a psychic storm that amplifies the leader's might. The greatest warbosses understand this instinctively. They do not merely fight, they manipulate the tide, orchestrating chaos with precision born of pure instinct, guiding their followers not by orders, but by the irresistible pull of power itself. And here lies the terrifying truth. If one warboss could rise above all others, surpassing even the legends of the past, if the fractured clans of the galaxy bent to a single will, then the legends would cease to be merely stories. They would become reality. The galaxy would face a force the likes of which it had never known. Billions of green-skinned warriors united under one banner, driven not by strategy alone, but by the raw, unstoppable energy of collective instinct amplified by myth and fear. It is a vision that chills the imagination. Worlds would burn, fleets would shatter, and empires would crumble. And yet within the hearts of Orks, this possibility is almost a dream, a legend waiting to be realized. For the legends of warbosses are not just cautionary tales, or memories of past terror, they are the blueprint, the seed from which a united Waaagh could grow. The stories whisper possibilities of power, unimaginable, hinting at a day when the fractured tide of Orkish violence becomes a single unstoppable storm sweeping across the stars. As one contemplates the legends of warbosses, it becomes clear that the path to unity lies within the myths themselves. Each warboss, each tale of dominance and cunning, is a thread in a tapestry that could one day bind the Orks as never before. The galaxy trembles not only at the present power of these leaders, but at the potential of what they represent, the terrifying, awe-inspiring possibility of a universe under the shadow of a single legendary warlord. It is seized, fought for, and claimed with teeth and claw, with fire and fury. Yet beneath the chaotic surface of their endless brawls lies a mechanism, a subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm that governs the tides of their warlike instinct. To control Orks is not to command them, it is to guide the storm, to become the eye around which their madness swirls. It is here, in this fragile balance of instinct and influence, that a single warlord might shape the galaxy. Orkish control is a dance of spectacle, strength, and the psychic resonance of the Waaagh. Leaders who understand this know that an Ork's loyalty cannot be bought or reasoned with. It must be earned through awe, through fear, and through demonstration of unassailable dominance. A warlord does not issue orders like a human general. They assert presence, radiating an energy that Orks instinctively respond to. Each roar, each conquest, each display of raw power, acts as a signal, a pulse in the psychic web that binds the countless Orks together, however temporarily. The Waaagh itself is central to this process. It is not merely a battle cry or a rallying point, it is a psychic phenomenon, a collective resonance that feeds upon violence, excitement and anticipation. It flows through the Orks, binding them in instinctual synchrony. When harnessed, it is a tool of unimaginable power, an amplifier of influence that allows a warlord to achieve what would otherwise be impossible. Control is never coercion, it is the art of guiding energy, letting the chaos of millions of minds align under a single unstoppable tide. Mechanically, the warlord leverages both fear and respect. Orks are drawn to strength, repelled by weakness, and enchanted by deeds that surpass all expectation. A single display of dominance, slaughtering a rival warboss, conquering a fortified world, or surviving against impossible odds, creates a gravitational pull that few Orks can resist. Clans begin to align, not out of discipline, but out of the instinctual recognition of power. Rivalries do not vanish,
but they are suppressed, folded into a larger narrative of conquest, where the strongest dominates, and all others follow. Yet this control is delicate. Orks are creatures of chaos. Even the most fearsome warlord must constantly reinforce their authority. Celebrations of victory, threats of punishment, rituals of initiation, all serve to remind the orks of the power they follow. The warlord becomes both spectacle and anchor, a figure whose mere presence focuses the violent energy of the mass. It is a system built not on logic but on instinct, myth, and psychic resonance, a combination that can turn scattered clans into a force capable of overwhelming entire star systems. The Orks' simple yet complex society amplifies this mechanism. Clans, though fractured, share myths, symbols and songs that propagate the legend of a warlord. When a leader rises above the rest, the stories spread like wildfire. Every victory is celebrated, every conquest memorialized, and the psychic echo of their dominance grows stronger. Orks themselves propagate the mechanism, loyalty reinforced through oral tradition, through imitation, through the instinctive recognition of power. The system is self-sustaining, feeding on its own energy, expanding as the warlord's reputation spreads across world. The most skilled warlords also manipulate the environment of battle. Massive gatherings, the orchestration of war machines and the use of awe-inspiring weaponry are not mere spectacle, they are tools of control. Orks respond to stimuli. The louder the explosions, the more overwhelming the assault, the more irresistible the call to follow. A warlord does not micromanage, they choreograph. Each engagement becomes a carefully directed expression of power, a demonstration that consolidates the fractured energies of thousands into a single devastating force. And so the mechanisms of control are both simple and terrifyingly effective. They rely on instinct, myth, psychic resonance, and spectacle rather than rules, diplomacy or coercion. A warlord who masters them can unite the ununifiable, channeling the ceaseless chaos of Orkish culture into a single unstoppable wave of destruction. It is a power, both fragile and formidable, requiring constant reinforcement, relentless demonstrations of strength, and a keen understanding of Orkish psychology and the raw instincts of their followers. A warlord must contend with the inherent unpredictability of Ork nature. Orks are not rational beings. They do not calculate, they do not hesitate, and they do not forgive weakness. Rivalries flare without warning, disputes erupt over the smallest slights, and even the most loyal warband can turn on its leader if provoked. To maintain control, a warlord must be ever vigilant, balancing displays of dominance with strategic indulgence, letting the clans feel freedom within the boundaries of the overarching power. It is a subtle art, a dance between chaos and coercion, a game of instinct and myth played across countless worlds. The warlord's presence itself becomes a weapon. When a leader steps onto the battlefield, the roar of thousands of orks rises like a storm in response. The psychic resonance intensifies, bending instincts toward a singular purpose. Every chopper swung, every slugger fired, becomes part of a larger rhythm, a beat in the symphony of destruction orchestrated by the warlord. The effectiveness of this mechanism is cumulative. Each battle fought and each rival defeated strengthens the pull, turning what was once scattered chaos into a wave capable of overwhelming entire star systems. Communication in this sense is instinctual rather than verbal. Orks do not require detailed orders, they sense direction through action, example and resonance. A warlord's movements, decisions and victories transmit instructions to the mass. Even the smallest gestures, raising a banner, the cadence of a stomp, the roar of a challenge, become commands embedded in the collective psyche of the walkers.
Leadership among orks is less about speech and more about being an irresistible force that others cannot help but follow.
Rituals too play a crucial role in consolidating control. Ork culture thrives on spectacle, challenges, duels, feasts of war and public displays of might all reinforce hierarchy.
A warlord orchestrates these rituals, ensuring that loyalty is both earned and celebrated. It is a system that exploits the orcs' natural tendencies, turning their desire for glory, dominance and recognition into a self-reinforcing structure. Even rebellion becomes a tool. Rivals who rise to challenge the leader are swiftly crushed, their defeat magnified as a lesson to all others.
reinforcing the Warlord's supremacy in a cycle that repeats with relentless precision. Technology and war machines further amplify the mechanism of control. Orks instinctively gravitate toward what is loud, fast, and destructive. A warlord who wields engines of war with skill, convincing even the most skeptical clans of their superiority, cements authority without a single spoken word. The very tools of chaos become instruments of unity, as the raw spectacle of weaponry, engines, and artillery channels instinctual awe into devotion. In the hands of the right leader, the battlefield becomes a theater of obedience, where instinct and myth converge to create unparalleled coordination. Ultimately, the mechanisms of control rely on one principle: the warlord becomes the focal point of the Orkish universe. Strength, myth, ritual, and psychic resonance converge to create a force that is both terrifying and elegant in its simplicity. Orks do not follow rules. They follow power. They do not obey. They erupt, and the warlord who can harness this eruptive energy, guiding it with instinct, spectacle, and legend, can unify what is otherwise ununifiable. In the hands of a master, this mechanism is unstoppable. Entire systems could fall under the shadow of a single war. The galaxy's fractured green tide channeled into coordinated devastation. Rival warbosses would be drawn into the fold. Clans would align under instinctual recognition of supremacy, and the psychic energy of billions of Orks would amplify the warlord's might beyond imagination. This is not theoretical. It is a frighteningly plausible vision, a glimpse into a future where one leader turns chaos into coherence, turning the galaxy itself into a stage for their dominance. If a single warlord were to unite the Orks, the galaxy itself would shiver under the weight of inevitability. Entire sectors would feel the tremor of a force unlike anything the Imperium, the Eldar, or even the Tyranids had encountered. The Orks, long dismissed as a collection of violent brutes, would transform into a coordinated storm, their instincts synchronized and their walkers amplified beyond comprehension. The consequences would ripple across space and time, reshaping alliances, toppling empires, and rewriting the very nature of interstellar war. The Imperium, vast and sprawling though it may be, would be the first to taste this tidal wave of green fury. Planetary defenses, carefully maintained fleets, and disciplined regiments would falter against a force that does not fear death, does not calculate loss, and does not rest. Siege after siege would unfold with terrifying efficiency, the Orks' combined might exploiting weaknesses faster than human strategists could adapt. Worlds that once stood as bastions of order would be reduced to smoldering ruins, the cries of the dying drowned beneath the roars of thousands of warriors united under a single banner. The Eldar, masters of foresight and psychic perception, would not escape unscathed. Even their most cunning seers would struggle to predict the movements of a unified Warlord. The chaos they so often anticipate would be amplified to levels beyond their comprehension. Their elegant fleets and devastating weapons, honed over millennia, could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers and the raw psychic resonance of the Ork. For all their foresight, the Eldar might find that their greatest advantage, the ability to anticipate danger, would be drowned in a tide of instinct and myth. Beyond individual races, the very balance of the galaxy would shift. Systems previously considered safe could erupt in conflict overnight, destabilizing trade routes, communication
networks, and the fragile order of interstellar politics. Rogue traders, minor factions, and isolated colonies would vanish, swallowed by the momentum of a Waaagh that no one could contain. Fear itself would become a weapon, spreading faster than ships or weapons could. The shadow of a united Ork empire would hang over every star system, an unyielding reminder that chaos, when harnessed, becomes unstoppable. Psychologically, the impact would be just as profound. Entire populations would live under the constant threat of annihilation. Propaganda, fear, and despair would ripple through the Imperium, eroding morale and creating cracks in even the most steadfast loyalties. Soldiers might fight valiantly one day, only to falter the next, overwhelmed not by weapons but by the sheer inevitability of facing a united Ork force. Civilians would whisper legends of the Warlord, stories spreading faster than fleets could respond, building a mythos so potent that even the bravest might hesitate before acting. The galaxy's responses would be desperate, improvised, and often futile. Fleets might attempt to concentrate power in anticipation of the Waaagh, only to be outflanked by sheer numbers and unorthodox tactics. Even the Emperor's finest generals, seasoned through millennia of war, could find themselves outmaneuvered by instinct-driven strategy amplified across millions of warriors. The problem is not merely strategy, it is the nature of the Orks themselves. They do not fight logically, they erupt, they overwhelm, they persist. When combined under a single warlord, this instinct becomes a force capable of defying even the most sophisticated military reasoning. Alliances would be tested to their limit. Spacefaring races would have to weigh whether to join forces, risk isolation or face annihilation alone. Trust would become a fragile commodity, as fear breeds both cooperation and betrayal. In this environment, politics would dissolve into pragmatism, morality discarded for survival. The galaxy would enter an age where power and instinct dictate outcomes, and any race unprepared to adapt to the scale of the Orkish threat would find itself extinguished. In this scenario, even the very concept of war would change. Conflict would no longer be measured in campaigns or sieges, but in overwhelming tides, psychic storms, and the relentless forward momentum of billions of green-skinned warriors. The scale, the intensity, and the unpredictability of warfare would exceed all prior understanding. This is not merely escalation, it is a paradigm shift, a rewriting of the rules that have governed interstellar engagement for millennia. It would not stop at the battlefield, it would reach into every corner of civilization, shaping economies, cultures, and the very psyche of the galaxy. Hive worlds would fall silent, their factories consumed by fire and their populations scattered or enslaved. Trade routes would collapse under the weight of unpredictable attacks, and the once reliable flow of resources that kept empires functional would turn into a fragmented, chaotic trickle. Fear would become currency, and the mere presence of Ork banners on a horizon would be enough to paralyze even the most hardened governors. Religious and ideological orders within the Imperium would struggle to maintain faith and unity. Priests, chaplains, and spiritual leaders would see their sermons drowned out by the omnipresent roar of green-skinned warriors. For many, the unification of the Orks under a single warlord would represent the apocalypse they had long feared, a living manifestation of divine punishment or cosmic indifference. Their doctrines would be challenged, their influence diminished, and entire systems could fall into despair, surrendering before even a single Ork fleet arrived. The Orks themselves would be both the cause and the effect of this galactic upheaval. A single warlord, through mastery of instinct, spectacle, and psychic resonance, could coordinate campaigns across star systems with unprecedented efficiency. Clans that once fought one another would now strike as one, their combined might amplified by legend, myth, and the irresistible pull of the Waaagh. It is a terrifying feedback loop. The stronger the warlord, the more cohesive the Orks become. The more cohesive the Orks, the stronger the warlord appears. What was once chaotic now becomes structured, unstoppable, and frighteningly effective. Other factions would be forced into desperate measures. Alliances, treaties, and truces would crumble under the weight of necessity. Even the most isolationist races would find themselves drawn into the conflict, compelled to act by fear or pragmatism. Fleets might attempt to preempt the Orks, but they would face a foe that operates beyond conventional tactics, one whose strength multiplies with every world they touch. Conventional warfare would prove inadequate against a force that is part instinct, part legend, and part psychic storm. The psychological toll of such a unified threat cannot be overstated. Entire populations would live in perpetual dread, not knowing when or where the next Waaagh might strike. Morale would collapse, and the very concept of hope would be challenged. Even the most disciplined armies might hesitate, falter, or retreat, paralyzed by the knowledge that they face not merely warriors, but an entire galaxy-spanning force bound by instinct and legend. In this environment, fear is both weapon and shield, as the legend of the warlord spreads faster than ships can carry messages or armies can respond. Yet even amid this terror, there is a grim fascination. Scholars, tacticians, and historians might study the phenomenon, attempting to understand how such a chaotic species could achieve unity and wield it with devastating efficiency. Their records would speak of the scale, the brutality, and the elegance hidden within the Orks' apparent chaos. They would document the rise of a force that defies expectation, a warlord who turns instinct into strategy, myth into command, and raw violence into unstoppable momentum. Ultimately, the galactic implications of a united Ork Waaagh are both immediate and enduring. Empires could fall, civilizations might crumble, and the very structure of interstellar society would be challenged. Yet the true horror is not only the destruction itself, but the realization that the seeds of this reality already exist. Orks are ever growing, ever multiplying, and ever violent. The potential for unity lies dormant within them, waiting for the right warlord to awaken it, and when that moment comes, the galaxy will never be the same again. The galaxy held its breath as the warlord stepped forward, a figure of overwhelming presence whose mere appearance seemed to bend the currents of fate. Across countless worlds, Orks responded instinctively, their instincts aligning under the gravitational pull of power that no rival could contest. This was the beginning of the first campaign, a wave of green fury set to sweep through the stars with relentless force. The engines of war roared, the air vibrated with battle cries, and even the void seemed to hum with anticipation. The initial strikes were surgical, yet chaotic, worlds falling under a barrage that was as much psychological as physical. The warlord did not merely attack, they performed, orchestrating carnage with a precision that belied the apparent randomness of Orkish instinct. Fortresses crumbled, fleets disintegrated, and planetary defenses were shredded beneath the combined might of unified clans. The Orks themselves moved with instinctual cohesion, as if the pulse of the Waaagh flowed directly from their leader's heart into the hands of every warrior, every pilot, every engine of destruction. Each battle became legend in real time. Cities were turned into theaters of war, their streets alive with the roar of thousands of charging Orks. Sluggers and choppers flashed under blood-red skies, engines screeched over molten craters, and the psychic resonance of the Waaagh amplified the warlord's command. Rivals who had once resisted now fought beside one another, compelled by instinct and awe to join the unstoppable tide. What was once fractured and chaotic became a cohesive, devastating force, overwhelming defenses before they could comprehend the scope of the threat. The first campaign was not only about conquest, but also about spectacle. The warlord understood the importance of awe in control, allowing rival bosses to challenge briefly before crushing them with overwhelming power, cementing their dominance across multiple worlds. Every act of violence, every triumph, served a dual purpose, securing territory and reinforcing the mythos that bound the Orks under a single will. Planets were scorched, armies annihilated, and legends born from the smoke and screams of battle. Yet it was not mere destruction that marked the campaign, it was the transformation of chaos into orchestration. Orks, whose nature had always been anarchic, now moved with an instinctive understanding of the campaign's rhythm. Ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and simultaneous strikes across multiple fronts demonstrated a level of coordination unprecedented in Orkish history. The warlord did not issue detailed orders, they were unnecessary. The psychic resonance of their presence guided instinct, aligning action with intent, turning natural chaos into a devastatingly effective strategy. The psychological impact on the galaxy was immediate. Imperial worlds, once confident in their defenses, crumbled under waves of green destruction. Eldar observers recorded shifts in Ork behavior previously deemed impossible, noting the uncanny efficiency of combined clans. Even the Tyranids, drawn to the psychic signals of war, hesitated, sensing a new, overwhelming force whose scale threatened to rival their own. The first campaign was more than a military operation, it was a revelation, demonstrating the terrifying potential of unity, instinct and legend combined. Across the stars, the campaign unfolded like a dark symphony. Every victory amplified the warlord's power, feeding the Waaagh and increasing cohesion. Every resistance broken became a lesson to other systems. The United Orks were not merely an army, they were a tidal wave of instinct and myth, unstoppable in momentum and terrifying in scale. The first campaign did not merely conquer worlds, it reshaped the understanding of warfare in the galaxy, proving that instinct, when guided by power and legend, could surpass the mightiest strategies of even the most advanced civilization. As the first campaign surged onward, resistance hardened, but so too did the warlord's resolve. Imperial commanders attempted to regroup, to anticipate the Orkish movements,
yet each strike proved more devastating than the last. Entire fleets vanished under coordinated ambushes. Orbital defenses once thought impregnable were reduced to twisted metal and fire. Each conquest reinforced the legend, spreading tales across star systems of a warlord whose presence alone commanded the loyalty of all Orks, whose strategy flowed instinctively through the chaos of billions of warriors. On the ground, the devastation was total. Hive cities were transformed into infernos, their inhabitants fleeing before the relentless advance. The green tide surged through industrial wastelands, over mountains, and across plains, leaving nothing untouched. Every battle was a display of both violence and cohesion, as Orks who once fought one another, now marched together, their instincts harmonized by the psychic resonance of the Waaagh. Rival clans, forced to confront the undeniable dominance of the Warlord, submitted, their energy absorbed into the collective surge of the campaign. Yet even in victory, there was chaos. The Orks thrived on destruction and disorder, and no campaign could fully suppress the natural tendencies of the species. Fires raged out of control, lootings escalated into anarchic brawls, and occasional disputes flared among even the most loyal warbands. But the Warlord, ever present and impossibly dominant, corrected these deviations with swift, brutal demonstrations of power. Challenges were crushed in public spectacles, turning potential rebellion into reaffirmation of loyalty. Each act reinforced the mechanisms of control, binding the clans tighter into the unstoppable force sweeping the galaxy. The campaign was also a lesson in fear as a weapon. The Warlord understood that terror amplified obedience. Reports of entire worlds surrendering before a single Ork landing force became common. News of massacres, captured leaders, and destroyed fleets traveled faster than any official communication channels, instilling dread in distant systems. Fear, like the Waaagh itself, became contagious, shaping behavior even before the Orks arrived. The galaxy began to bend psychologically under the pressure of an unseen, yet undeniable tidal wave of green destruction. Strategically, the first campaign highlighted the terrifying efficiency of a united Orkish force. Multiple fronts were engaged simultaneously, each assault reinforcing the other. Fleets attacked from unexpected vectors, while ground assaults synchronized with orbital bombardment. The instinctual brilliance of the Orks, guided by the Warlord's psychic resonance and charismatic dominance, allowed for feats previously unimaginable. Systems fell faster than reinforcements could arrive, and entire star sectors reeled under the concentrated might of what was now more than just clans. It was a single, unified entity. By the campaign's apex, the legend of the Warlord had spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, tales were told of worlds lost in hours, fleets obliterated in minutes, and armies crushed before they even saw the enemy. The psychological toll alone was staggering, leaving empires scrambling, advisors desperate, and populations demoralized. Even isolated Ork warbands, previously unaligned, began gravitating toward the center of power, drawn by instinct, myth, and the irresistible pull of strength. The first campaign was more than conquest, it was a revelation. It demonstrated the terrifying potential of unity among the Orks, the unstoppable force that a single warlord could wield, and the catastrophic consequences for a galaxy unprepared to face such a storm. Worlds burned, civilizations collapsed, and the legend of the Warlord solidified, leaving a trail of chaos and awe in their wake. The galaxy would never forget the first campaign, nor the promise of the unstoppable tide it had revealed. Surged across the stars, resistance began to coalesce, desperate yet determined. The galaxy could not stand idly by while the green tide advanced with unstoppable force. Fleets were hastily assembled, planetary defenses reinforced, and alliances strained to their limit. The Imperium, the Eldar, and scattered independent factions rallied, each determined to halt the Warlord's advance, each unaware of the full scope of the catastrophe that awaited them. Yet resistance was a fragile illusion against the cohesion of a unified Orkish force. The Warlord had not merely amassed warriors, they had orchestrated instinct, legend, and psychic resonance into a single instrument of war. Even the most disciplined fleets found themselves outmaneuvered, overwhelmed not only by numbers, but by unpredictability and instinct-driven strategy. Conventional tactics crumbled under the sheer audacity of Orkish coordination, leaving defenders scrambling, improvising, and often failing in ways that seemed almost preordained. Worlds fell in succession, their populations either annihilated or enslaved, and the defenders' morale collapsed under the weight of inevitability. Imperial commanders who had faced chaos, tyranids, and even the most cunning Eldar attacks, struggled to comprehend the scale and coordination of the Orks. Every victory by the Warlord was magnified, a psychological hammer against those who resisted. Tales of entire armies surrendering without a fight spread across the stars, eroding confidence and leaving sectors vulnerable to the next wave. The collapse was not sudden, it was methodical. Resistance hardened in pockets, yet the very act of standing against the Waaagh only funneled survivors into traps and ambushes. Ork instinct, amplified by the Warlord's psychic presence, allowed for synchronized assaults that defied conventional logic. Fleets were drawn into annihilation, planetary defenses were overwhelmed by simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts, and ground forces were encircled in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The galaxy was learning too late that fighting the Orks as isolated factions was futile. Even among allies, cohesion was tenuous. Desperate leaders attempted to unite under ad hoc coalitions, but fear and distrust undermined cooperation. Generals argued over strategy, fleets hesitated, and bureaucratic indecision slowed reaction time. Meanwhile, the Orks exploited every weakness instinctively. The Warlord's psychic resonance amplified the chaos of their enemies, turning hesitation into opportunity, and disorganization into a weapon of its own. Every failure reinforced the inevitability of collapse, every misstep magnifying the legend of unstoppable power. Yet resistance was not entirely futile. In rare moments, brilliance and courage emerged. Small fleets executed daring maneuvers, planetary militias orchestrated guerrilla-style defenses, and individual heroes rose to challenge the tide. These acts, though often temporary, slowed the advance and forced the Warlord to react, revealing the delicate balance required to maintain control over billions of instinct-driven warriors. Every success, however fleeting, became a story whispered among survivors, a spark of hope in a galaxy otherwise overwhelmed by chaos. The psychological aspect of collapse was equally devastating. Entire populations lived in constant terror, their understanding of order shattered. Administrators, soldiers, and civilians alike struggled to maintain even the semblance of normality. The Orks did not merely conquer, they inspired dread, shaping behavior before armies even engaged. Fear became a weapon as potent as any artillery, spreading faster than reinforcements could arrive, leaving entire worlds on the brink of surrender, without a single Ork landing. Through it all, the Warlord maintained an unyielding focus, orchestrating the collapse with instinctive precision. The mechanisms of control, refined through campaigns and legend, ensured that the Orks remained aligned, even amid chaos. Rival clans, once potential sources of disruption, were absorbed into the Force through awe, spectacle, and brutal demonstrations of supremacy. The collapse of resistance was not merely military, it was systemic, a combination of instinct, myth, and psychological domination that ensured the galaxy's defenses unraveled before the unstoppable tide. As the collapse spread, the galaxy's attempts to resist became increasingly desperate. Fleets engaged in reckless maneuvers, fortresses were stripped bare in frantic defense, and worlds were evacuated in panicked haste. Yet the Warlord anticipated, reacted, and exploited every move. Even the most brilliant strategists were undone by the instinct-driven unpredictability of the Orks, now unified under a single psychic force. What had once been scattered raids now resembled a coordinated symphony of destruction, each note played in perfect resonance with the Waaagh. Populations that had once held hope now faced despair, cities burned, supply lines were obliterated, and communications collapsed. Fear spread faster than the Orks themselves, paralyzing leaders before they could act. Entire planetary administrations crumbled, leaving survivors vulnerable to both the physical onslaught and the psychological manipulation of a force that thrived on chaos, yet was guided with precise intent. Even those who fought valiantly often found themselves surrounded, their efforts nullified by the sheer cohesion of a unified Orkish tide. Among the Orks, this unity manifested as an almost supernatural synchronality. Clans that had once fought each other now acted as extensions of the Warlord's will. Ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and orbital strikes were executed with uncanny precision. driven not by orders, but by instinct, reinforced through myth and spectacle. The psychic resonance of the Waaagh became a tangible force, amplifying aggression and coordination to levels never seen before. It was as though the galaxy itself had become a stage for the Warlord's dominance, each act of violence choreographed to maximize both terror and efficiency. Resistance, when it occurred, was met with overwhelming reprisal. Fleets that dared to counterattack were crushed, and planets that resisted were decimated. The Warlord's mastery over spectacle and control ensured that every victory reinforced authority. Rival bosses were humiliated or slaughtered in public displays, serving as stark reminders of what awaited those who defied unity. Even the bravest Orks understood instinctively that allegiance was not optional. Survival demanded it. Through fear, myth and demonstration, the mechanisms of control ensured that collapse spread inexorably across the stars. The psychological toll extended beyond the immediate battlefields. Imperial commanders questioned their own strategies, doubting even the most basic calculation. Civilians fled in panic, and allies hesitated to engage for fear of being swept away. The very notion of resistance began to erode, replaced by a creeping inevitability. When faced with a warlord who could unify instinct, myth and psychic resonance into an unstoppable force, hope became a fragile illusion, and despair a tangible reality. And yet, even amid the collapse, there were sparks of courage. Small-scale victories, daring evacuations, and guerrilla tactics occasionally slowed the Waaghs, if only momentarily. These instances reminded the galaxy that resistance was not impossible, but they also underscored the futility of isolated efforts against a fully united force. Every delay came at tremendous cost, but even in failure, it allowed the Warlord to refine strategy, test instinct, and strengthen the cohesion of the Orkish tide. Ultimately, the collapse demonstrated the terrifying potential of unity among the Orks. What had once been fragmented, anarchic clans became a single unstoppable force, capable of overwhelming the galaxy's defenses. The first campaign had proven the possibility. The ongoing collapse revealed its consequence. Entire systems were lost, empires shaken, and the psychological weight of the Warlord's presence spread faster than fleets or weapons ever could. The galaxy, in all its sprawling complexity, was now confronting the full magnitude of what a united Orkish Waaghs could unleash. Amid the relentless surge of the Waaghs, the galaxy sought a moment of respite, a glimmer of possibility that could halt the unstoppable tide. The turning point arrived not in grandiose strategy alone, but in subtle ripples of resistance, in the bravery of those who dared to confront the seemingly inevitable. It was a moment when the Warlord's dominance, impressive as it was, would be tested, not merely by firepower, but by the cunning, desperation, and ingenuity of those who refused to surrender. For centuries, civilizations had underestimated the Orks, dismissing them as chaotic brutes, without the capacity for sustained coordination. Yet the first campaign and the subsequent collapse had shattered that illusion. The Warlord's unity transformed instinct into devastating efficiency, creating a force capable of overwhelming the galaxy's most disciplined armies. And yet the turning point revealed the delicate balance that maintained this unity. A single miscalculation, a rare brilliance, or a moment of unforeseen strategy could shift the momentum, offering hope even amid overwhelming despair. The initial sparks came from unexpected sources. Small fleets, previously considered inconsequential, executed daring maneuvers that disrupted the coordination of Orkish forces. Guerrilla tactics on key worlds slowed advances, forcing the Warlord to divert attention and resources. These acts, though limited in scale, had an outsized effect. They introduced uncertainty, a crack in the psychic resonance that had aligned the Orks so flawlessly. Even the smallest disruption threatened the perception of inevitability, reminding the galaxy that instinct, no matter how amplified, could be countered with ingenuity. It was on the battlefield that the turning point truly took shape. Orkish assaults, though vast and coordinated, began to encounter resistance that was adaptive and relentless. Imperial forces, Eldar warriors, and independent militias converged in unprecedented collaboration, exploiting weaknesses in timing, communication, and strategy. For the first time, the Warlord faced a challenge not of strength, but of unpredictability. The psychic resonance of the Waaghs, while still formidable, experienced interference, as simultaneous threats fractured the instinctive alignment of the Ork. The turning point was not immediate. It was measured in days, in incremental gains that slowly shifted the narrative. Small victories became symbolic, morale shifted, and the myth of absolute dominance faced its first true test. While the Orks remained overwhelmingly powerful, the galaxy began to realize that cohesion was not invincible. The Warlord's authority, formidable as it was, required constant reinforcement, and the sustained pressures of multi-front resistance began to strain the mechanisms of control. Psychologically, the effect was profound. Orks, attuned to instinct and myth, sensed the subtle faltering of dominance. Clans that had once followed without question began to question. Rivals looked for opportunities, and isolated bursts of disobedience tested the Warlord's focus. The legend, while intact, faced scrutiny in real time, and the psychic pull of the Waaghs showed its first signs of fragmentation. This was the moment when strategy met instinct, and the universe glimpsed the possibility of defiance against seemingly unstoppable power. It was also a test of leadership, not merely for the Warlord, but for those resisting. Generals and commanders across the galaxy coordinated with unprecedented precision, leveraging intelligence, adaptability, and psychological insight to exploit vulnerability. Every maneuver, every ambush, every unexpected counterattack chipped away at the aura of inevitability. The turning point revealed that while instinct and unity created tremendous power, it was not absolute, and even the most formidable warlord could be challenged by ingenuity, courage, and relentless persistence. The first signs of systemic impact appeared as Orkish advances slowed. Key worlds resisted occupation, vital fleets were held at bay, and logistical networks, once thought secure, became vulnerable. The galaxy began to breathe, not freely, but with cautious anticipation. The turning point did not end the Waaghs, nor diminish its threat, but it transformed perception. The narrative shifted from inevitable doom to tense uncertainty, from despair to the fragile spark of hope.
As the turning point deepened, the Warlord's control over the Orks was tested like never before. Rival clans, sensing the first tremors of uncertainty, probed for weaknesses, occasionally defying orders or acting with unexpected independence. These isolated acts of rebellion, while small, had a cumulative effect, introducing friction into the psychic resonance that had aligned the Waaagh so perfectly. Even instinct, amplified by legend, proved vulnerable when confronted by simultaneous threats and unprecedented challenges. On key worlds, defenders leveraged terrain, fortifications, and strategic deception to blunt the Orkish advance. Ambushes became more frequent and effective, supply lines were disrupted, and communication between Ork warbands faltered under the pressure of coordinated multi-front resistance. Each disruption, while minor in isolation, contributed to a growing sense of instability. The Warlord, ever aware of the psychic pulse of their followers, recognized these fractures and acted swiftly, reinforcing authority through displays of dominance. Yet even these acts could not fully restore the seamless cohesion that had defined the earlier campaigns. The turning point was as much psychological as it was tactical. Orks, creatures of instinct and myth, are profoundly sensitive to perception. When they sense uncertainty in leadership or disruption in coordination, it reverberates across the ranks. The Warlord's aura, once unassailable, now faced challenges not only from the galaxy's defenders, but from the very followers whose loyalty had been the foundation of their power. Moments of hesitation, rare but consequential, rippled through the Waaagh, revealing the delicate balance between instinct, myth, and command. This period also revealed the ingenuity of the galaxy's defenders. Generals, strategists, and heroes adapted quickly, exploiting even the smallest fractures in the Ork unity. Guerrilla strikes, feints, and misdirection became increasingly effective, forcing the Warlord to divide attention and resources across multiple fronts. Coordination, previously effortless due to psychic resonance, now required constant reinforcement, and the cost of maintaining control escalated with every unexpected setback. The turning point had shifted the dynamics of power, showing that even the most unstoppable force could encounter limits when confronted with adaptability and ingenuity. The narrative of the turning point was not one of sudden victory, but of possibility. Worlds that had fallen began to resist with renewed determination. Fleets that had been shattered rebuilt with ingenuity and resourcefulness. Every small success became a story, a legend in the making, inspiring hope and demonstrating that coordinated, intelligent action could challenge even the most legendary warlord. While the Waaagh remained a terrifying force, it was no longer untouchable, and the perception of inevitability began to erode under pressure. For the warlord, these challenges required both adaptation and reinforcement. Spectacle, myth, and intimidation remained tools of control, but they were no longer sufficient on their own. Displays of dominance became larger, more brutal, and more calculated, aimed at quelling doubt and reinforcing loyalty. Every victory, every crushed rival, and every demonstration of power served a dual purpose: maintaining physical dominance and repairing the psychic cohesion that had begun to fray. The turning point was not merely about resistance, it was about testing the limits of leadership itself, revealing that control over instinct and myth requires constant vigilance and adaptation. By the end of this critical phase, the galaxy had glimpsed the possibility of defiance against the green tide. The Waaagh remained a formidable, nearly unstoppable force, but cracks had appeared, small, fragile, yet undeniable. These cracks, exploited with skill and courage, offered the first real hope that the warlord's legend, as terrifying as it was, could be challenged. The turning point transformed the narrative, from one of inevitable conquest to a tense, precarious struggle, where every decision, every maneuver, and every act of courage carried the weight of the galaxy's survival. Even after battles ended, worlds were retaken, and the green tide receded. The mark of a unified Waaagh lingered like a scar upon the stars. Entire civilizations had been reshaped, their histories rewritten by a force that was both instinct and legend. The warlord's legacy was not measured in territory alone, but in the transformation of perception, the reshaping of strategy, and the awakening of fear that would echo for generations. Legends grew faster than fleets could traverse space. Stories of the warlord's dominance spread across sectors, carried by survivors, refugees, and even the Orks themselves. Tales of unstoppable conquest, psychic resonance, and the unity of chaotic instincts became mythic narratives, inspiring awe and dread in equal measure. Across the galaxy, leaders debated, strategists studied, and scholars recorded the unprecedented phenomenon. A species, once dismissed as simple, united under one will to achieve what had seemed impossible. The legacy was felt most immediately among the Ork clans that had once bickered and fought for scraps, now understood the potential of unity. Even after the warlord's campaigns ended, the psychic imprint of their presence endured. The instinctive recognition of strength, the reverence for spectacle, and the myths born from campaigns created a cultural shift. Orkish society, forever chaotic, had glimpsed the power of coordinated instinct, and the seeds of future Waaghs would carry that lesson forward. The warlord had rewritten the rules of Orkish loyalty, dominance, and ambition, but the legacy extended beyond the Orks themselves. The galaxy's defenders had been forced to confront their own limitations, to innovate and to adapt in the face of a force that defied conventional understanding. Entire fleets, armies, and planetary defenses evolved in response to the threat. Learning from the brilliance and brutality of a unified Waaagh, tactics once considered standard became obsolete. Strategies were rewritten to account for instinct-driven cohesion on a scale previously unimaginable. The warlord had, inadvertently, reshaped the very nature of galactic warfare. Even civilizations, untouched by the green tide, felt its influence. Rumors, warnings, and fragmented reports traveled faster than ships, instilling both fear and preparedness. Economies adapted, trade routes shifted, and political alliances strengthened, all in response to the demonstrated capability of the Ork. The warlord's campaigns had created a ripple effect, a galaxy forever changed, not only by conquest, but by the psychological and cultural imprint left in the wake of their actions. The most lasting impact, however, was philosophical. The warlord demonstrated that instinct, myth, and psychic resonance could be molded into a coherent force. Leadership, even among the chaotic, was shown to have limits and potential alike. Legends of the warlord's cunning, brutality, and insight became benchmarks against which future leaders, Ork or otherwise, would measure themselves. The galaxy learned that even chaos could be orchestrated, and that the boundaries of possibility could be expanded through the combination of instinct, spectacle, and vision. Yet, the Warlord's story was not merely one of conquest and awe, it was also a cautionary tale. The galaxy understood that power, concentrated in the hands of a single figure, when amplified by instinct and myth, could destabilize entire civilizations. Empires recognized the fragility of cohesion and the dangers of underestimating instinct-driven forces. Even after the Waaagh receded, the lessons endured: vigilance, adaptability, and an understanding of the psychological dimensions of conflict had become essential for survival in a universe forever altered by the shadow of the Warlord. The Warlord's campaigns left more than just physical scars on the galaxy, they left a legacy of fear, respect, and transformation. Planets that survived the Waaagh carried stories of destruction and resilience, the echoes of battle becoming part of local folklore. Militaries adapted, citizens rebuilt, and societies hardened, but the shadow of the Warlord's presence lingered, a constant reminder that unity among the Orks, once thought impossible, could be realized with catastrophic effect. Across the stars, future generations of leaders studied the campaigns as both cautionary tale and inspiration. Imperial tacticians examined the failures that allowed the Orks to surge across multiple systems. Eldar seers attempted to interpret the psychic resonance that had guided billions of Orks with such terrifying efficiency. Even other Ork warlords, hearing tales of the legendary Warlord, began to emulate methods of unity, spectacle, and psychological dominance. The galaxy had been changed not only by destruction, but by the demonstration of what could be achieved when instinct and myth converged under decisive leadership. The Warlord's influence also reshaped alliances. Systems that had previously relied on isolation learned the importance of communication and collaboration. Fleets that had been scattered became coordinated, and intelligence networks evolved to anticipate threats beyond simple calculation. The galaxy's approach to warfare, politics, and survival was irrevocably altered. The Warlord, whether alive or deceased, had left a blueprint for both terror and resistance, showing that power and instinct, when guided by vision, could challenge the very foundations of civilization. For the Orks, the legacy was immortalized in legend. Stories of the Warlord's victories, their cunning, and the sheer scale of the Waaagh became central to Orkish culture. Clans revered the memory of unified action, understanding instinctively that the potential for coordination was a path to ultimate dominance. Even in the natural chaos of Orkish society, the seeds planted by the Warlord endured, ensuring that future generations would carry forward lessons of unity, spectacle, and the irresistible force of collective instinct. The psychological resonance of the Warlord's campaigns extended into the minds of enemies as well. Fear became a tool long after the battles ended. Entire systems prepared preemptively for future Waaagh, investing in fortifications, fleets, and intelligence with a knowledge born of survival. The Warlord had demonstrated that perception, myth, and instinct could be as powerful as technology, leaving civilizations forever wary of a force that thrived not only on violence, but on awe and legend. Ultimately, the legacy of the Warlord was twofold. It was a story of unstoppable power and catastrophic consequence, and it was a lesson in the fragility and adaptability of civilization. The galaxy had witnessed what could occur when instinct was organized, when myth was harnessed, and when legend became reality. It was a testament to the terrifying potential of the Orks, a species often dismissed, yet capable of rewriting history under the guidance of a single, extraordinary leader. Even in quiet corners of the galaxy, long after the battles, whispers of the Warlord persist. The green tide, though dispersed, had left its mark, and the memory of unity under chaos remained vivid. Worlds rebuilt with caution, militaries trained with renewed purpose, and civilizations carried the psychological weight of having faced an unprecedented force. The Warlord's shadow, though intangible, endured in memory, in fear, and in preparation, shaping the galaxy for generations to come. In the end, the Warlord's legacy was eternal. They had not merely conquered, they had transformed. The galaxy, in all its vast complexity, had been forced to acknowledge the potential of unity among the most chaotic of beings. Through instinct, myth, and psychic resonance, the Warlord had created a force that could challenge empires, alter civilizations, and leave an indelible mark on history. And so, the story of the Waaagh, under a single leader, would be told for millennia, a reminder that chaos, when guided with vision and power, could become unstoppable.